Hi, it's me, Olivia. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel for interesting stories and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the description. Thanks. This brought me up short. Dancing? With whom? Flirting with Leonidas to keep him off balance was one thing. That was duty. But looking forward to dancing just because I was in a beautiful dress? What justified that? I had still only been kissed twice, once by Leonidas. Well, all right, he kissed me more than once, but only on one occasion, and once by Julia. Well, I had actually kissed her. Both had given rise to strong responses within me, but strongly different as well. I couldn't decide which one was wrong, but it didn't seem that both could be right. Julia, on the other hand, seemed to have no concerns at all. She had been dutifully somber, at least on public occasions, but her internal energy could not be contained forever. "Oh, Your Majesty, could we have a party tonight? Please," she begged. Even Mother was not immune to Julia's charms. I knew if she asked something of me that way, I would give her the keys to the kingdom itself. Mother merely smiled, though, and nodded. The rest of the day was spent in preparation for the celebration. Formal, official mourning was over. For those maidens who had not lost loved ones in the war, all mourning was over, and they were free to get on with their lives. I suspected our castle was not the only dwelling hosting a party that night. When we were finally ready, Mother sent Amy to inform Leonidas. Some little time later, we heard a knock at the door, followed by Amy's entrance. Leonidas followed her through the door with casual ease until he saw us. Then he froze in mid-step, a look of wonder spreading over his face. Resuming his motion, he glided up to where Julia and I stood, stopped with his hands on his hips, and let his gaze drift languidly from the floor to our carefully waved hair. Although his words were supposedly to Mother, it seemed as though he were talking to himself. Fire and sunlight, green forests, and deep blue sea. Your Majesty, it is only with greater self-control than I can believe I possess that I do not issue another decree. Maidens of such surpassing beauty should always wear colorful gowns. Not that even these gowns can match these maidens. His eyes had tried to take in both Julia and I simultaneously, in the end flickering back and forth between us. As he finished, he was looking at me, and for some reason I wanted his attention to remain with me. "Milord Regent, I seem to remember at least one black gown that seemed to meet your standards for a maiden's attire." He refused to be cowed, grinning instead. "Yes, but that was so long ago." "Not so long that I have forgotten," I whispered. "Nor have," he tried to reply, interrupted by Julia. "May we go eat?" she complained. "I'm hungry." Mother contained her own grin and looked to Leonidas with an upraised brow. He nodded to her, bowed low to Julia and then to me before offering his arm to the queen. Our escort sorted out almost as before. However, Dracen's fiancée, Ivina, had pleaded illness and Alrin, the High Canyonite, had claimed duty of some sort or another. Our procession then was Queen Celia with Leonidas, Strain with me, and Dracen with Julia. We met General Raynal with Duchess Amity near the dining hall. She seemed to cling to him more and more lately, never standing straight and tall. At least, not when anyone from High Canyon was around. The meal itself was as much a harvest feast as an ordinary dinner. Though our nation had lost much in the war, still, there was enough for a sumptuous meal. We had introduced those from High Canyon to a wider variety of spices than they had been accustomed to, which required a correspondingly wide variety of dishes to take full advantage of their impacts to taste. It was almost a treasure hunt, finding the gems of delicate sensation among the fires of wildly spiced concoctions. The first bite was always tentative, the next intake divided almost equally between another bite and a quick gulp of cooling liquid. Of course, Julia and I could only taste a few bites of each course, constrained by our garments to almost fully compressed stomachs. The men, on the other hand, ate hugely and imbibed even more hugely on the fine beers from the year's harvest. Finally, though, even this great meal was done. At a nod from Queen Celia, attendants cleared some of the lower tables. The musicians that had been providing gentle music during our meal now switched to lively dance tunes. Leonidas was on his feet as soon as they started to play. "Your Majesty, would you do me the honor of dancing with me?" he asked politely. "I think not," she smiled. "At least, Not until the musicians burn off a little of their present energy. Then, my princess, he smiled to me. I wanted to say yes, but dancing had never been a favorite activity for me. I was too slight to provide a suitable partner for most of the noble women in the palace and looked like a silly child whenever I tried. An automatic refusal sent a ripple through my hair before I even realized that I would now be expected to be the slimmer, shorter partner. Won't someone dance with me? Leonidas appealed to the sky, or at least the ceiling. I will, Julia called, standing so quickly that Strain had no time to assist her. Leonidas' grin widened as he offered his arm to my red-headed rival. They made a lovely couple. Julia's bright energy found a kindred soul in Leonidas' easy humor. He knew our dances well. As I watched them, I settled ever more deeply into my seat. That could have been me, I realized. Should have been me, my heart shouted. They danced several quick, light airs before returning to their seats, breathless and laughing. Leonidas took his seat next to me and looked at me in mild humor. He leaned closer and whispered, "Do you remember what happened the last time I saw you pout like that?" I jerked upright in my chair and looked at him in horror. He wouldn't dare kiss me here. Would he? Maybe? He laughed at the complex emotions I knew must have been playing across my face, then teased, "Perhaps you should have accepted my invitation to dance." Perhaps, I replied, my response more reflex than clear decision. I mean, now that, my meal is settled. Is it settled, then? He asked. Yes, I believe it is, I answered, letting my eyes meet his clearly for the first time in a very long time. He stood again, moving to assist me with my chair. I rose to my feet with shaking knees, still torn between desires that seemed to have no common ground. At that instant, though, the compelling urge I had was to dance with my handsome escort. The musicians continued to play light-hearted tunes. It was amazing to me how expressive my gown was. As was proper, I gathered up the full skirts in one hand as Leonidas took my other and placed his hand upon my waist. He was a strong lead, letting me know with sure pressures on hand and hip what motion he intended for me. I surrendered to his guidance, responding as much to the music as when I played my own instruments. It was wonderfully cheerful. As we gained familiarity with each other, he began to initiate even more adventurous motions, finally whirling me under his high arm as I lightly moved first away, then back to his touch. I had dropped my skirts with the motion, and my twirl had lifted them high enough to cause a gasp from the crowd, followed by an instant of twittering laughter. But I didn't care. The music and my partner's enjoyment of it had released me from cares, at least for the moment. I had long learned not to believe in coincidences when Mother was in the room, so I felt only an instant of surprise when the next tune the band selected was slower and much more intimate. Leonidas allowed me to once again gather my skirts into my free hand, then snaked his own hand farther around my back than before, bringing us almost into contact. "Please, my Lord Regent, it is not proper," I whispered. But he didn't relent. At least, not without a price. "Only on one condition," he warned. "You must call me Leonidas from now on. Can there be no exceptions?" I smiled. He pulled me even tighter. Now our bodies were touching, lightly it is true, but the pressures felt warmer than summer sunshine. "What exceptions would you like?" he smiled. It was a most gentle smile, except deep within his dark eyes where lurked a message I wasn't sure I wanted to decipher. "Perhaps, my prince, we can think of something." Now it was my turn to smile, my turn to let deeper thoughts show through the window of my blue eyes. "That's not a bad start," he grinned in acceptance. I let a smile linger on my own lips to make sure we could pretend to be speaking of inconsequential matters. "A start toward what destination? What destination would you like?" "My lord, my Leonidas, you are master here." "I like that even better," he smiled even wider. "But my father's warriors provide no authority over a maiden's heart." "Is that the destination you desire? Is it within reach?" he asked gently, stopping in the middle of our dance. Reality crashed in on me with heartless power. In all my life, even on the day of our defeat, I don't believe I wanted anything more than to be able to tell him that my heart was within his reach. But that impulse died before birth, victim to a masquerade that was a greater sacrifice than even my worst nightmares could have imagined. Without further word, I fled from the room, tears filling my eyes beyond capacity and spilling down my cheeks. My sorrow knew no limits that I could control and spilled into anger. Anger at Mother, who had forced emotions into my heart that had no true place there. Anger at Leonidas, who represented the cause of our distress. Anger at myself, for weakness and for being 1,000 kinds of fool. Yet my anger did nothing to stem the flow of tears. When I reached my room, I threw myself on my bed still fully gowned. My pillow worked to catch my tears, supplemented by the soft nose of Wraith who tried to comfort the inconsolable. Only a knock at my door shocked me enough to regain some small measure of my control. Yes, who is it? It is Mina, Your Highness. I have come to help you undress. My beautiful gown was rumpled and tear-stained, and somehow that was too much to bear. I had no one I could cherish freely, nothing of true beauty when even my gowns were borrowed from Mother. But I had enough ugliness in my life and didn't need to destroy what beauty was there. Very well, I called, rising from my bed. Mina bustled into the room with emotionless efficiency, neither noticing nor condemning my loss of control. I was released from the beautiful blue dress without further damage and handed a dressing gown to ward off the autumn chill. Your Highness, she said quietly, I saw something I think should be reported, but I'm not sure just how or to whom. She knew who I really was, of course. Her manner told me this was really a matter of policy for the realm, properly handled only by myself or Queen Seelie or possibly the Chamberlain. With a glance, I invited her to continue. A few minutes before I came in here, I saw Vina, Dracen's fiancé, heading for the balcony 2 levels below where you watch the sunset. Yes, perhaps she wanted some fresh air, I said, not seeing any significance to her observation. Yes, Highness, but as I reached this corridor, I glanced back and saw Alrin, the man from High Canyon, ascending the same stairs. Indeed, it was probably a coincidence. Perhaps, Highness, but it is not the first time I've seen that coincidence. It seems to occur whenever Vina feels ill. I had not noticed, I mused. Does anyone else know of this coincidence? Not that I know of. Only your apartments are down this hall now, among the Achaean women. All the other ladies' attendants use the other stairs. I stood up and started to pace about the room. A part of me wanted to ask Mother for guidance or Hugh. But a bigger part of me just wanted to get back at the intruders from High Canyon. I had already known that Dracen was not a terribly bright person. It was unlikely that he knew of Vina's actions. She, on the other hand, was quite sharp. Yet, if she were betraying an Achaean because she thought her prospects were better with someone from High Canyon, she was sadly mistaken. In some respects, correcting her betrayal was even more important to me than getting back at them for my own tribulation. Mina, I said judiciously, providing a rationale for what might soon be a very important conflict. It has been some time since Vina has been checked on by her fiancé. Would you go and tell Dracen I am concerned about her? If you know where she might be, you could tell him that, too. Mina's eyes had a shrewdness that made it clear she knew exactly what I intended to happen. With a nod at her orders, she left. I sat down to my studies, waiting patiently now that the wheels were in motion. It was perhaps a half an hour later when I heard the commotion in the hallway. Mina knocked on my door and entered breathlessly. Sir Dracen has just killed Alrin of High Canyon. He found Alrin with Vina, his intended, and killed him in a fit of rage. Milord Regent has imprisoned Sir Dracen and intends a trial tomorrow. Imagine that, I said quietly. Chapter 11, Pulling Strings. The mood was decidedly more sober the next morning. Queen Seelie and I were in our accustomed places when Leonidas entered the throne room. He walked directly to the king's throne and paused, looked at Queen Seelie with a grimly determined expression, then turned and sat. Queen Seelie stood immediately, but before she could speak, Leonidas said, "Sit, madam, or leave. But today I judge the life of a man. That is a solemn responsibility, and you should consider it a sign of respect for this furniture that I choose to take on myself, at least for this trial, the full position of king. Tell my father if you will, but today I will sit." This time, Leonidas had the power of personality. For one of the few times in her life, Queen Seelie was overmatched. She sat again without a word, though her eyes showed more worry than before. As well they might. As did my own. My frustrated impulse of the night before had resulted in the death of one man, and it was clear that Leonidas considered the very life of another hung in today's balance. Raynal had entered with Leonidas, almost lost in the power of the confrontation between the regent and queen. Now Leonidas nodded to his own general instead of our chamberlain. Raynal responded by waving at a High Canyon guard at a side door. In a moment, Drayson entered, surrounded by 4 High Canyon warriors for once moving in a structured formation. Drayson had not been harmed as far as we could tell. He was unarmed, including stripping off his armor, but no signs of abuse or even fighting showed on his face. He also walked with his accustomed long stride, not apparently favoring any hidden injuries. His guards marched him to stand before the thrones. Once again, Leonidas spoke before Queen Celia had a chance. Drayson, Knight of Achaea, you stand accused of murder. How do you plead? Drayson didn't reply immediately. He looked at Queen Celia and then at me. She met his eyes with calm dignity, but I knew my own eyes were showing horror and guilt. After a long enough pause to accept his statement of loyalty to her, not to the regent, Queen Celia nodded at Drayson. Not guilty, he declared. You were seen standing over the body, your sword red with Alryn's blood. Vina testifies that you killed him, Raynal charged. Apparently, he was going to serve as prosecutor. Oh, I killed the coward, Drayson declared, but it wasn't murder. He was attacking my fiancé. She doesn't say that, Raynal denied. She's afraid of what you honorless scum will do to her if she tells the truth, claimed Drayson. Raynal bristled at the insult, but maintained his tone when he spoke. Describe the situation you encountered that led you to believe Alryn was attacking the woman. That woman is my fiancé, Drayson growled. Describe the situation, Raynal repeated, the very flatness of his tone promising no relief from his questions. I went to look for Vina, who had said she was feeling poorly. A servant told me she was on a balcony getting some fresh air, so I went there. When I got close, I heard that she was not alone. Her voice was muffled, as though she couldn't speak clearly, so I drew my sword and moved quietly to find the reason. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Thanks.